People in my life, marveling over the people in my life. As my mom cooked Thanksgiving dinner, I remembered when my family went to my grandpa's house for Thanksgiving decades earlier. My grandparents have long since passed, and other family members have graduated this life. Before I knew it, my mind tumbled on a lady who I would come to know as Granny Marvel. I must have been 12 years old when Marvel became my occupational therapist. For those of you who don't know, occupational therapists help individuals with disabilities gain physical life skills, like writing, tying shoes, brushing their teeth and hair. Since my cerebral palsy was too severe to enable me to perform such tasks, Marvel worked with me on using my first communication device called Autocom. Autocom was this huge and heavy board that fitted onto the front of my wheelchair. The Autocom had a lot of squares that could be programmed to generate letters and single words. I activated these squares with a magnet fashioned in my left hand. Before I had Marvel as an occupational therapist, I struggled using this communication device. When I first met with Marvel, she instantly discovered that my right arm often got in my way of selecting the squares. She asked me how to restrain my arm that would be comfortable for me. Even with those interventions, I still had challenges operating the Autocom with my good hand. So, Marvel presented me with some other options, including strapping a stick onto my head where the stick rested on top of my head and pointed forward. Since the commercial head stick slips around, Marvel made my helmet out of splinting material. She even flared the sides out, so I wouldn't sound funny to myself when I vocalized. I could use my Autocom with my customized head stick, but I still had trouble reaching all of the squares. Consulting with me first, she tried some other things with much success. At the end of one school year, Marvel told me I had worked so hard using the Autocom, I got to graduate from occupational therapy. Deep down, I knew I was too severely disabled to operate the Autocom. Marvel must have sensed that I made this conclusion, because she said I was fine like I was, but technology hadn't caught up to me yet. On that day, Marvel taught me two of the most important lessons that would carry me throughout my life. The first lesson was that I was just fine in spite of my severe cerebral palsy. In other words, I was not broken. I also learned that it sometimes is okay to give up on something that I have worked so hard on. The older I have become, the more I realize that giving up actually means that you are making room for something better. This lesson has proven to be so true. Soon after Marvel and I gave up on the Autocom, I got accepted into a research project that provided me with a communication device that translated Morse code into letters, numbers, and punctuation. I tapped Morse code out with my head. I ended up using Morse code for 30 years. Marvel stayed in with me, attending my birthdays, seeing me at a small group home, having me over to her condo, and doing other things with me. From time, Marvel mentioned that I should write a book about my life, because she wanted to understand what it was like to be me with all of my extra challenges. This shocked me, as she was one of the few people who understood me the best. Plus, I didn't know much about writing books, so I always blew Marvel off every time she encouraged me to write my autobiography. One July evening in 1999, my mom called to let me know that Marvel had died a couple of weeks earlier. My mom knew Marvel was special to me, but my mom or anyone else couldn't have possibly grasped the magnitude of my fondness for this lady who I became to love as Granny Marvel. The only way that I could deal with my grief was to write about how Marvel's and my unique relationship developed. The more I wrote, the more I realized that I had some other noteworthy friendships. So, I kept writing until I created a book that paid tribute to those professions and friends who helped me become a strong and thoughtful person. I titled my autobiography People Who Raised Me Beyond, and it is available on Amazon.